Hello and welcome to Stage Left. My name is Jody Kerchner and I am Professor of Music Education and the Director of the Pedagogy, Advocacy, and Community Music Engagement Division at the Conservatory of Music. During our time together today, a group of panelists and I would like to share our journey with you. This is a journey, a unique perspective into arts education in prisons. Specifically, we will share our journey, which has admittedly at times been celebratory, fun, confusing, controversial, frustrating, and very musically satisfying. We like to share this journey with you, our experiences, our observations, and how this experience, this matter of community music engagement, has provided great impact on our lives professionally and personally. My journey begins about 5 years ago when I was in conversation with Emerita Professor of English, Phyllis Gorfain, who is the founder and director of the Oberlin Drama at Grafton program. This theater program was a program at the Reintegration Center at the Grafton Correctional Institution, a mere 9 miles from the Oberlin Conservatory, but alas, I had no idea it even existed within such close proximity. I suspect that's not by accident. Usually prisons seem to be at the periphery of our society, actually. Anyway, Phyllis was telling me about her retirement gig and this wonderfully exciting program that she did and had been doing. And she said that the men at this state penitentiary, that the men were wanting to start a choir. And did I know anyone by any chance who could conduct a choir? And then she stopped mid-sentence and said, wait a minute, you could do choir. And I said, now wait a minute, I don't think I have time. I don't think I would have anything in common. I have no idea of anything about prison arts or prisons in general at that time. And so after the conversation, I took a long, hard look at my own philosophical views about access, musical access, certainly musical access for all. After all, I certainly taught this lesson many times in my music education courses. But the thing about the word all and music education for all and music access for all is that no one can be excluded from the word all. And so it was time for me to put into action what I had been talking about, what I had been reading and studying about all these many years since grad school. So I met with the men at the prison and I was surprised because I guess I expected them to look or behave differently. Maybe I had watched one too many NCIS or blacklist shows on television, I think. But I had no idea that the people were genuinely interested in music of all kinds. They wanted to learn. They wanted to engage with someone and people on the outside. They were looking forward to having students, that is the residents, the men who were incarcerated, as well as the prison administration, were eager to welcome Oberlin students to the mix to serve as section leaders in the vocal sections or to be an assistant choral conductor for the groups. And that began a deeper conversation for me in terms of how did they get there and how are the people who I know not there, or what prevented them from having a position and the privilege that I enjoy. And so these have been stark conversations that I've had not only with them, but certainly through my own reflection. I signed up for a 6-week Oberlin Music at Grafton Choir program, and it's been 5 years since, and it has been one of my passion points in life, certainly personally and professionally. And so I would ask you to listen with an open heart and an open mind as you hear from, yes, me, but from former students, now Oberlin alumni, as well as my colleague, Rebecca Schasberger, who has just started the Oberlin Strings program at Grafton. I'd like for each of us to introduce ourselves and what year that you've graduated from Oberlin College or the Conservatory of Music, and what your role has been with the prison music programs at Grafton. Evan, would you like to start us, please?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. So I am a 2020 grad. I just graduated from the Conservatory in voice performance. And I was an assistant sort of to you in the choir, and I had the opportunity to lead some sectionals and try leading some warm-ups. So mainly I was just there sort of as another voice to help sing with the choir and kind of, yeah, perhaps guide a section.
Thank you. Josh?
Hi, I graduated from Oberlin Conservatory in 2016 with my bachelor in vocal performance. And while I spent time at Grafton with you, Dr. Kerchner, spending a lot of wonderful time with the guys in there, assistant conducting as well, same with Evan, leading sectionals, being a part of the choir, and also being just kind of an outside perspective for a lot of the guys in there that I think they really appreciated during our time.
Mm-hmm. Khalid.
Hello, my name is Khalid Taylor, and I graduated in 2017 with a degree in musical studies with a concentration in music and cognition. And so I'm currently in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, and at the time, I was a choir teaching assistant and bass section leader with OMAG. Some beautiful memories and experiences, of course. And at this moment, I'm just kind of taking some time to heal and recuperate and work on myself in the midst of the overall kind of global and national climate. So, yeah.
Thank you. Ailish.
Hi, I'm Ailish. I graduated this past spring in 2020 with degrees in viola performance and politics. And I've been teaching at Grafton for a couple of years, doing the strings program with Rebecca, teaching violin, viola, group classes, all sorts of things like that.
Great, thank you. Daquan.
Hello, everyone. My name is Daquan. I use him, his pronouns. I just recently graduated this past spring in 2020. And my work with the OMAG program was in the choir, like Evan, Khalid, and Joshua. And, you know, I was, you know, as like a resource to some of the men in there, and, you know, was basically blessed by their presence every Friday. And so I'm really appreciative to be a part of that program. Also, my majors, I'm a musical studies major at Oberlin and anthropology major as well. So
thank you. And my my counterpart, who's the director, founder, and director of Oberlin Strings, the newest musical program at Grafton, Rebecca Schasberger. Rebecca?
Thanks, Jody. Yeah, my name is Rebecca Schasberger, and I'm not an Oberlin alum. I actually went to the Cleveland Institute of Music for my graduate work. And it's been, I guess, 2 academic years that we've been running the strings program at the prison, teaching violin, viola, and cello. And when I say we, that's myself and then a group of students that includes Ailish and some others who go and help us, because with 15 men in the class and all the many small details of how to play a string instrument, it's exceedingly helpful to have more than just myself to try and bring the men along that journey.
Rebecca, could you tell us a little bit about how this Oberlin Strings program started?
Absolutely. So I was working down the street from Oberlin at the nonprofit Credo Music, and I was in a brand new position there that I had a lot of voice to help shape, and I was in my own personal journey of learning more about the justice system in this country and the just the system of prisons and incarceration. And it was about that same time that one of my colleagues said, "Oh, you should look up Jody Kerchner. She's doing this choir thing in a prison." So I think I Googled you and like found your website, and then was talking with Peter Slowick, and we were planning this winter term experience for students to do various chamber music activities both on campus and travel to do some performing and hurricane relief cleanup. This was after Hurricane Maria. I think it was Hurricane Maria. And part of that winter term experience included having Dr. Kerchner come and speak to the students about her work in prisons. Originally, we were hoping that the students could also perform one of their chamber pieces there in the prison, but prison time isn't always our time, and that didn't work out. But we still had Dr. Kerchner come and speak to the students, and a number of them expressed a great deal of interest in what they were hearing about the choir program. So those conversations with the students, with Dr. Kerchner, began this process of imagining what might be possible with strings in a prison. And it coincided with my own interest in learning in this area. So we were able to set up a meeting with the prison administration sometime, was it February maybe of that year, sometime right after the winter term. And in probably record timing for prison settings, that following fall we were able to start the program. And Jody, I really am so grateful to you for having begun the relationship and helped them to see the importance and the place for music in a prison, because I think, well, both your work and the work of the theater program before really paved the way, I think, for the strings program to enter in. And it was amazingly easy, all things considered, to start the program because they already had some basis of understanding the value of it.
It's so interesting, you know, with any community music engagement or any community engagement program, building relationships is just key. That's probably a life lesson, right? But the relationships and knowing when to give, when to take, when to push, when to back away is just so important. And so I'm certainly Phyllis's work paved the way for me, and I think that they became used to us, they meaning the prison administration, and knew that we were there for educational reasons, that it wasn't just fluff and stuff, right? This what we were doing had content and meaning. And so I think that that's really helped. It's not perfect, certainly I'm not suggesting that what I offer, but or what you offer, but it is meaningful to all of us. You know?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So thank you for that. Eilish, what did you expect? Or I'll open this up to anybody. What did you expect before you went inside the prison? Had you been inside a prison before?
Can I go? Because I really wanted to share this.
Okay, go ahead.
Experience. I had heard rumblings of Dr. Kerchner. This was after my first year at Oberlin. And so everyone's like, you need to go talk to Dr. Kerchner, you know, find your way to her office. So I did that, I made that connection. And a few short weeks afterwards, an opening had opened up for the assistant conductor for the OMAG program. And so I was completely excited and grateful to like jump on board and get involved with the work that was happening there. And so sort of answering your question, I had actually been in prisons multiple times before I had gotten into Grafton. And so I remember an experience in elementary school where they actually took us to the Cook County Jail, and basically, because I grew up in the city of Chicago, and basically it was like, if you continue down, you know, this path, then you may end up here, right? And so that was sort of my introduction to the criminal justice system, and that memory sort of remained with me. And throughout the years, some of my family members had encountered, had encounters with law enforcement and entered the criminal justice system. And so it was pretty innate, you know, to my experience. I was, you know, going into Grafton, there was a sense of understanding that I got from the prisoners initially, but also it was a new experience for me as well, right? Being a college student, working with some of the men in there, you know, so it was a very interesting and unique experience that I hadn't sort of navigated throughout my entire, you know, journey. And so I appreciate you for pulling me in and allowing me to be a part of the program.
Well, I mean, look, I mean, I've learned as much from each of you, you know, as anything. I mean, you know, that there have been questions and times where, you know, you could just take a putty knife and scrape me up off the floor, you know, because I'm not quite sure what to do with the experiences. So this truly is a collaboration. And I think that that's another piece that, you know, the collaborative nature of arts facilitation in prisons is just key. Anybody else? What were your expectations?
Sure. It took me about 3 seconds to make up my mind of whether or not I was going to join you on this adventure. I think you brought it to my attention and said, "Would this be something you'd be interested in, Josh?" And I went, "Yes." You know, and I had done some work previous to this particular job, working doing concerts and things in juvenile detention facilities in St. Louis, with Opera Theater of St. Louis and a couple other places. And I knew, you know, there's such a stigma that comes with being incarcerated. And a lot of people will go their entire lives not ever actually speaking to someone who has been through the prison system or is currently in the prison system. And so I saw the opportunity as twofold. One, I wanted to go and, you know, share what I have been working on with other people and give them an opportunity to create a language that's all their own that they might not have had access to. But two, it allowed me to go and talk to people and see the humanity of the people that were in the prison system. It was something I knew I could bring out of the experience, and I still do to this day talk about my experience working with the men at Grafton, because it was such a unique moment where you got to just be people, and they got to just be people for even, you know, a brief hour of their day. And so I was excited to go into it. I was really looking forward to it. I knew that it would be unlike anything I had done before, and I didn't know what to expect from that. You know, I wasn't used to having to take all of my belongings out and put them in the car or a locker every time I showed up a place. But I loved it. I absolutely loved every second of it, and I still have fond memories of the guys there and the stories that that I've come out of that experience with.
Any other thoughts on that?
I guess I can tag along on that. So I think for me, I've had family that have been kind of uh, introduced forcibly or otherwise into the criminal justice system, um, but I've never had the chance to visit them. Um, and so kind of this experience was the first time I really got to go into any type of center or prison or jail type system. And for me, it was interesting because I was born and raised in Brooklyn, New York. And so I just was taught from very little to be aware of my Blackness and I've had experiences with police that were unpleasant, to say the least, in my time growing up. And so I think going to jail was something that I like within my spirit felt very correct to be sharing music with these folks, but also in some ways was counterintuitive to some of the programming that I had embraced as someone who wanted to avoid interactions with like the law in any way, and in as many ways as possible. So I like have actively like not tried to see myself in situations that would get me caught up in the criminal justice system. So it was kind of challenging for me to also think about like what types of folks would get caught up in the system. In some ways it was challenging, but also in some ways like I knew some people that were already in the system. And so I think I had some like trepidation, some fear going in initially. Uh, and I think part of that fear was like seeing people that looked like me in the system. And so, oddly enough, I felt like I'm not sure of the demographics of Grafton in particular, but there were not as many like Black people in the choir as I thought there were going to be, and for some reason I thought that there would be more Black people in it. Not that that was a like bad thing or a good thing. Like otherwise, I think I just had a conception within my mind that there are a lot of Black people in jail, and so one, I guess I'm curious about whether or not like the Black men in Grafton felt like comfortable or free to express themselves, like, and to sing and in that manner, be a part of a community that embraced that. But for the folks that were in it, it was such a beautiful experience to share some brotherhood, some like true brotherhood within that space. I felt so supported and celebrated and like affirmed in my journey and my process and my practices. And I truly felt like there were heart to heart, spirit to spirit moments of connection, of tenderness, of vulnerability, and affirmation. So um, I'm incredibly grateful for the opportunity to have shared so many moments with you, Jody, and also with the folks there.
Thank you. You've raised a really important point, actually, and that is, while I always think about arts, we're providing access to musical experiences in a prison setting, that really is not quite accurate, right? I mean, the prison decides who gets to be in the choir or in the string program, whether they are compliant with their programming, educational or health programming, but it's also behavior dependent. And to your point, Khalid, do we have people who are feeling comfortable enough to step into this means of expression, this means of musical expression? So I appreciate very much your bringing these points to the fore. Were there other trepidations, concerns that you had going into a prison? It was a new for me. Any thoughts on that?
I think I'll speak just to that. I think before going in, I didn't quite know what to expect either way. And I think one of the things I thought about was, you, Dr. Kerchner, you've had so much time to build these relationships and trust with this community. But as someone who was going in for a short time, really, it was my last year, so I only had like a little more than a semester because of coronavirus before I had to go home, and I didn't know. I had hoped that I would feel welcome, but I didn't know, and I knew that me coming into the choir was adding a new dynamic to the choir, and so I think I didn't know what to expect going in, but I felt really grateful for the way I felt welcomed and a member of the community as soon as I entered. Yeah, and I think the as soon as I walked in, it really was no different than any choir I'd ever been in at other times in my life, and it felt the exact same. And so I think for me, immediately those sort of trepidations that I may have had, or just apprehensions wondering, were sort of wiped away.
Yeah. Evan, you had a unique experience in that, I was unable to conduct the choir due to some surgeries. And so Evan was there. Evan was the conductor. And so I'm appreciative. And wow, they were skeptical at first, they were like, okay, do we not? Do we like this? And they were very appreciative, as I hope you heard. And certainly they conveyed to me of your work with them.
Well, I was so grateful to you, and I was also especially grateful to the members of the choir. And I said to them, I'm here to learn. I don't have near the experience Jody has, but I hope we can learn from each other, and I hope we can sort of have that mutual respect. But I felt so, and I was nervous to try doing that, and I had never really conducted before, led those kind of rehearsals. And so I was nervous going in, but I think they were so supportive of me, and I learned so much from them during that experience that it felt very mutual. So thank you, and thank you to the other members of the choir.
Any other trepidations, Rebecca?
Well, I was going to say I didn't particularly have trepidations going in, but people were definitely asking me as I told them that I was starting this thing. Um, Sorry, what? You're going to work in a prison? Um, is that safe? I think especially because I'm female working in a male prison and I'm all of 5'2" people were just like, my mom and dad were okay with it, but some people were just a little concerned about this idea. And even now, people will ask me, do you fear for your safety? Do you feel safe? And very much like what Evan was saying, there's such this feeling of mutual learning and mutual respect with these people that it's a joy to be able to respond to that question with a very affirmative no. I don't feel unsafe. I don't worry for my safety, even when there's not a guard in the room. I try not to be naive about how I think about these interactions, but it's a remarkable thing to get to interact with somebody and see them as a whole person and to learn their quirks and to learn their sense of humor and learn how their brain works a little and get to journey with them on this learning process. And you don't even think of them anymore as a convicted felon. You don't even wonder, like, what are you here for? They're just a person who you're making music with, and that's such a beautiful thing to get to be part of. It's a gift, really.
Yeah, if I could just add to that, I remember when I did my training for the prison, you have to go through like a 4-hour volunteer training. And I did my training with 3 of my friends. We're all female presenting. 2 of them are like 5 feet tall, and that's, and they're tiny. And I remember the whole entire time the guard was just trying to like terrify us, and he basically spent 4 hours telling us all the horrible things that could go wrong, especially because we were women. All of the reasons to be scared, how to like defend ourselves or whatever. And we all came out of it and we were kind of like, what just happened? Like, is this actually a thing we need to worry about? And honestly, that was the most scared I've ever been in the prison. Every time that I go now, it's like, they're my friends. And honestly, they take, like, I trust them so much. They're very protective of us. Like in our strings program, the guys that we teach, they care so much, and they do anything to like make sure that we're okay. They're constantly checking on us, and I'm like, no, it's not about us right now. But yeah, so I wanted to share that the most scared I've ever been was in a room with a guard and none of the guys. So.
It's fascinating how people from the outside perceive prison. Because even me, as a 5'11", 260-pound black man, I still got asked, "Oh, weren't you like scared about going into the prison?" And we hear all the things that prisoners do, and you go, "Well, most of that is like a very rare occurrence from what's actually happening behind those walls." And I think some of my best memories were spending time with those guys every week. And I remember that it was probably one of the first or second times in there I was talking to one of the guys, and he said, we're not bad people. Everyone thinks we're bad people. We're good people that made a mistake, and now we're trying to serve our time for making that mistake. And that was the feeling I got from every single guy I worked with in that prison. And they're human, and they're funny. Oh my God, they're so funny. I remember we had one of our sectionals, and I was with all of the basses, and we were in a big circle. And they were like, one of them said, "Hey, Josh, like I have trouble singing this long phrase. It's really long. I feel like I need to take a breath in the middle of it. What do singers do?" Jody remembers this. What do singers do to like help get that little extra gas out? And I was like, "Look, you're gonna laugh at me, but sometimes when I'm getting to the end of a phrase and I just need a little more gas to make it there, I just squeeze my butt cheeks together, give them a little clench, and that's enough to get that last bit of air out." And they went, "No, I said, yeah, try it. And so we got to it, and there it was with me and a dozen inmates all going, clenching their cheeks together and dying laughing. And they still talked about it. I got comments weeks later being like, I'm still clenching. I'm practicing my clenching. And like, you know, it's these moments that you don't hear outside of the prison walls, that they're just human beings that are having a good time. And I learned so much from working with them that any trepidation I might have had going in, if it was there, was alleviated within the first 10 minutes. And it's something that I think I wish more people could experience.
There's a song in our choir that we've kind of adopted, or maybe I hope we've adopted, as one of our songs, our theme songs, and it's May the Stars Remember Your Name. And you know, I remember when I first introduced this song. This song was written by a formerly incarcerated person, and this song talks about, you know, the stars and every star will, you know, remember my name, your name, everybody's name. And I remember one person in the choir saying, this is pretty intense. You know, people drive by the prison all the time and they don't know what goes on in here, and they don't want to know who we are. And the thought that for all eternity that the universe could, somebody pays attention to us and would remember our name, that's really kind of a profound thought. And that really caught me in a way. You know, I did the score analysis and the interpretation certainly of the piece, but I hadn't thought about that interpretation coming from their experience, that indeed they are intentionally separated from society so that they would be forgotten, removed, isolated, what have you. And indeed, it's through the arts, certainly through our music making, without being overly romanticizing what we do, it is a way of connecting and expressing our humanity, and remembering one another's humanity.
Yeah, even the act of showing up, even before any music is made, just the commitment to people to come back and come back the next week and come back the next week. I can't imagine what it's like to be incarcerated, but when you hear the men's response and reflection about this, it's so powerful. I remember one of our violin students, I'm going to get teared up thinking about it, but one of the performances, he was introducing a piece and he just sort of off the cuff started sharing a bit about how the men in prison are like crayons that got broken and somebody threw them in the trash. And then we came along and we found the broken crayons in the trash, and we decided that there was still beauty and there was still potential and those crayons could still make art. And it was just such a touching thing to hear from his perspective what it means that we come and that we show up and that we haven't given up on these men. So it's profound anytime that they choose to open up and share with us about what it means. And I don't share that story to, you know, pat ourselves on the back, look at us, we're so good. But it's really just to say that these are people, and it means something. It makes a difference when we reach out and care for people as people, regardless of what mistakes they may have made, in spite of what society calls them, just to acknowledge and affirm week in and week out that these are people, that they matter, that their lives are important.
To add on to that, I think something that's really, that like in some ways how art is very unique to the perceiver's experience and also the created experience in some ways. I found that the choir had a range of folks with different sentences. And so for like the fact that we were in a reintegration center was, I think, also a really important part to consider, or at least that there were folks that were going to be reintegrated back into society. And the idea that kind of what you're talking about, Jody, earlier, that one of the folks expressed was this idea that, you know, society has forgotten these folks, and by the time they come back into society, they are second-class citizens that don't have the same support and access to resources and encouragement to do the things that everyone else does, and have the power and the agency and autonomy to make the same choices that they could prior to this kind of mark on their person, on their personhood, and on their Americanness. And I feel like so for some folks, like the artistic experience of creating within the choir was like kind of reaching back out to the humanity, to the creation and the creative process, but also like for some folks it was like, how do I meet myself in the midst of knowing that I'm going to be here for the long haul, for the rest of my physical time here? Like, how do I meet myself and meet that same beauty and that same art and that same creation within a space that seeks to confine me, that seeks to put me within a box and bury me before I'm even buried. So I think that I really believe that art is like one of those tools that can help transcend, but also ground us in like who we are and how we are and what we can conceive outside of the physical parameters that are sometimes set on us.
Such an eloquent way of suggesting that, you know, through the arts, the men and we, as we engage, as we assume the role of creator, we get to imagine our best possible selves, right? And that requires imagination that people can't take away. There's a creativity and a creative sense that no one can strip this from us. It could be difficult to maintain. It could be difficult to practice. I'm not saying that, but in essence, you know, reimagining themselves or imagining themselves through the arts as who they want to be, maybe who they were before prison, maybe who they've yet to explore, is something that intrigues me.
I want to follow up on that. I think that's really key to the experience. And one thing that I noticed about being in the choir was that everybody wanted to be there. And I've been in many choirs, right? And that's just not the case with most choirs. So
Daquan.
But everybody wanted to be in that room. And in that room, right, we created a space that was comfortable, that was welcoming, collectively, right? Not us as the people on this call, but everyone in the room engaged in the art and worked towards something, right? Because they weren't just singing to sing, right? They, you know, this was something that we were sort of offering, but a lot of the work that we were doing was going towards a final performance where their families could come and hear them, or even the guards and things of that nature, the warden can come and see the work that they have done. And that was transformational to just be on a stage with these gentlemen and just, you know, bearing that authenticity, that vulnerability in that way, and opening ourselves up each and every Friday to accomplish that goal. And so when we say that this program was life-changing, we don't say that, you know, out of any type of, you know, lack of understanding about what we were really doing, right? This was work that was getting done, but also transformational work that helped to establish a foundation and love for the arts behind bars, right? If we want to frame it that way.
Mm-hmm. I mean, these guys are incredibly creative before we even got there. And I think that crayon analogy is incredible because it is so true that they were still able to create things, and all we did was show up and give them more tools to be creative, and ways to continue on their journey of creativity. I mean, the things that they could do with, you know, like a paper clip and some nail clippers, and the woodwork that we saw that some of them did was insane. One of the guys made a little piano. Do you still have it?
I'm trying to find it here. Here it is. It might not work, but because of my background. Oh well.
It zips in and out. There it is.
Well,
like, I can't make that. You could give me a year and all the tools in the world, and I still wouldn't be able to make that thing. And so it was really cool to see how we really just came in to give them a greater, wider toolkit for their creativity and for understanding themselves and for navigating the situation they were in and the world they were in. We gave them more tools to go back and say, things are hard, but I've got choir coming up next week, or I've got my violin lesson, and I'm getting ready. I can't believe I've gotten to this next level of learning this new thing. And it's, you know, it's how I think a lot of us as musicians feel every time we get to the next step in our training. But taken to the umpteenth degree. You know, it was so exciting for them to be able to be in a situation where they have a lot of their rights and freedoms taken away from them. But they find this freedom in creativity, in music, in art, in blanket statement art. That was incredible to watch grow in my time with them.
Do you remember the person who had this gorgeous falsetto voice? And we were doing like a vocal interview sort of thing for placement. And I said, so now you can sing in your changed male voice. And this person said, I don't have one. And I said, of course you do. And this person hadn't sung since he was 10 years old. And so had the model in his mind of the pure soprano voice. And so that's what he emulated when he was singing. So we did a few vocal exercises and he found his adult changed voice. And this was this new, what? I have this now too? I had the falsetto and this new voice. I mean, it was just this incredible something. Yeah, you have both of these things to be expressive. But, you know, they just sometimes don't know what they can do. I suppose it's true for any of us. We don't know what we can do until somebody prompts us to try something, you know?
On that note, I was thinking about the fact that like, I like this program is so important for so many reasons, and I think that it also just like bothers me that like I'm just thinking about just the prison industrial complex and how like I feel like the prison system basically kind of forces people in a very like specific manner to reflect on what they've done. And I'm thinking about the fact that, you know, out of that space, like all these men are continue to create beauty in the ways that they can. And this program is one of the ways that can help facilitate that process a bit more and give these tools like Josh was talking about. Part of me kind of also frustrated at the fact of like, why, I guess there's a call to the arts generally within our communities and the support of like the government to support arts, but just like, why are there not spaces that are facilitated spaces of reflection, of space to breathe and to understand who we are and to create that version of us, like without it having to get to the point where someone is forced to be, again, like in confined behind bars. I don't know, I was just thinking about that, and it might be a bit tangential, but I was just thinking about that in this moment. It's just like there's so much art. I think a lot of like creative folks tend to be folks that not tend to be, but often have difficulties navigating society because of the way like their dreamer kind of space that they exist in is sometimes met very cruelly with the harshness of the, you know, this society that we live in, I guess. So
Yeah, I've been thinking about this a lot because I think there's a lot of things with this sort of program that we're doing, and especially with teaching violin and cello. This is a very Western colonial project, and so there's some obvious questions I mean to ask ourselves about like what we're doing in teaching this. But by the end of the year, or by March, I guess, because we had to leave early, it became so obvious that every week when we went in, it was for the teachers, for all of us, and for all of the guys. It didn't matter what kind of week we had had. Half the time we were all exhausted. We were all doing grad auditions and then like flying back in time to get to their class on Wednesday afternoon and then flying out to our next audition the next day, and, you know, just like crazy. And we had no idea what the guys were doing in their weekly basis. You know, we had vague hints of some weeks being better than others, but we didn't know the details. But it was so obvious that hour and a half just became this space of like, that all was gone. Like we were just in a different world. We were all just there together. It wasn't even about the music so much. It was just about like being present in that room together. And having that space of like reflection and stillness kind of that didn't really exist for, definitely didn't exist for all of them, didn't exist for a lot of us. It was just like, so I think that was one of the most important things about it. And it just became even less about the music at the same time as it became more about the music too. So it was just a nice space to be in.
Evan, go ahead.
I'd like to add a memory, a great memory that I had was one afternoon after the Friday rehearsal, a man came up to me and he had written down 3 questions. One was technical, one was musical, and one was about confidence in singing. And they were so well worded, and the questions that I still ask every day in the practice room. And I think the confidence one was, how do I continue to sort of feel like I'm singing with my own natural voice, and how do I continue to sing with confidence and to let my voice out. And the musical one was, I don't remember exactly what it was, but the technical one was, about really complex question about breath, coordination, and different muscles that are used. And I looked at him and I said, I'm going to need a week to answer this question because these are such good questions. And I also said, you tell me, I'm in my 4th year of my degree. I am still wrestling with these questions. I don't have the answers for any of these. So I said, I'll go back, I'll talk to my voice teacher. I'll come with some things that I've learned or my voice teacher has taught me. But I said, you come back in, we can have a conversation about this because I can learn, we're asking the same questions. There really is no difference. And I think thinking about that lately too, I've been thinking about why do we sort of give certain definitions of artist and take those definitions away from other people? And why do those of us sitting in a practice room in a conservatory get to be labeled as an artist, but the people who are asking the very same questions and really diligently wanting to know those questions, why are they not being labeled as artists? So that's something I've been thinking about, but it was interesting.
I just finished reading Trevor Noah's book, Born a Crime, an incredible story of his life growing up as a multiracial person in South Africa. But there was a specific quote that I was trying to find from it that he talks about when he was younger and he started working and making money, and how he never had the opportunity to do that before. And it was talking about this mentality that we think that people just need to pull themselves up by the bootstraps and work hard and they can do anything. And he said, that's all fine, but without the resources from someone with a position of power or access to things helping you, it's almost impossible to get places. And I think about that, once I read that, it permeated everything I thought about in my memory of where I come from and the people that we worked with. It's, we gave them access to something that they already could do. And it's the same with coming into finding your adult male voice. It's something that he could always do, but he never had someone with the knowledge of it come to tell him that this is a thing that you can do. And it opened up a whole new world to him. And I think that's a lot of what this program and the string program and the theater program are about. It's about, like I said, with the whole creativity, unlocking your creativity. It's telling them something that they've always been able to do and giving them the resources to do it there, but also once they leave and for the rest of their lives.
I think also, just so Jody doesn't have to say this, I think we're not the ones who need to be having this conversation, right? Because we aren't the bearer of all resources, right? And there's so much red tape out there that Jody had to sort of knock down to get to the prison and provide some of these resources. But some of those barriers are still in place. And I think right now is the most opportune time to have these conversations and say that these are some of the wonderful experiences that we have gotten to have as people who have worked with the men in the choir or the music program in general. But these are some of the things that we're still encountering as well, that's preventing us from getting a lot of the work that we still want to get done. And so I think right now it's, with all of the change that we're seeing, And this conversation isn't new, right? If we look at the Black arts movement and how it made its way into the prisons, and sort of served as a tool for liberation and understanding of oneself. That happened in the late 80s and 90s, so this is something that we need to continue to fight for, that we need to sort of bring up in conversation for everyone who has a hand in providing resources to incarcerated populations.
Can I ask a question to the string players? Because I actually, I'm curious as to, because I have no idea about the string program because it started after I left Oberlin. What was it like? What was the instrument situation like for working with the inmates? Because I know with the singers, we have it, we're carrying it. I'm fascinated to know what that experience was like.
We reminded them, look, you're gonna have instruments with end pins. Is that okay? They're like, yeah, no problem.
Yeah, that was a strange conversation when we went in and reminded them that there were metal spikes on some of these instruments, and they were like, that's cool. They can take them back to their cells. I was shocked when they said that. But we got permission from the administration to let them have instruments, and then some of the instruments are on loan from the Oberlin Conservatory's education department. Instruments that I suppose at times are used for college students who want to take secondary lessons and don't have an instrument, but they had some extras. And then a few were on loan from Credo Music. And then the cellos were actually donated by a gentleman in the community who has a relationship with the prison. And to be honest, I'm still a little confused about what that relationship is, but he's done some things before for the prison, and somehow he got connected with us and had cellos. So the cellos were donated by him. And then
provided truck driving, like the big rig truck driving lessons at the prison at one point. And
Oh, I remember all the guys getting their truck driving certifications while we were there.
there we go, that guy. Yeah. So that's where the instruments came from.
The hard thing came when we needed to do repairs on the instruments, or bow rehairs, new strings. Their strings were breaking all the time, and there was a lot of very innovative solutions from the guys themselves, including some very impressive taping things on some bows and tying broken strings into knots to so you could still use them. A lot of them were very amazing, actually, but eventually we figured out how to get all the things that needed repair out of the prison and then brought them back in the next week. But again, it's the logistics thing. There's just so many layers of getting things in and out, and even just communicating with who has what instrument now and where is this going. And we've had a couple instances where people get out and then their instruments stay in the prison. So then figuring out who takes that instrument, because we have a finite number of spots, just depending on instruments. All sorts of fun logistics conversations there.
I would like to wrap this conversation up. This could go on forever. I'm incredibly excited about the topics that have been raised here, and that I hope will spur on future conversations, if not amongst us, amongst other people who are watching this conversation. But I guess the final question is, what is the impact of this experience attached to Oberlin? And Rebecca teaches a course that is affiliated with the string program. It's a part of the pedagogy, advocacy, community engagement. I teach a course called Arts Behind Bars. That's also part of the PACE division. But the rest of you who weren't part of a course per se, but of your own personal interest, what impact has this Oberlin experience at the prison?
You muted yourself.
Yeah, I did. Personally, or I should have done that before, right? What impact has this had on you personally or professionally?
I'll start. I went into the prison almost every week for 2 years. And it became, by the end of my time in college, just my favorite part of the week. And it just always was. It was great. So on a personal level, it was just a really amazing thing to be able to do. And it's one of the things that I missed the most from COVID shutdowns. It was one of the hardest things to leave, and we didn't even get to say proper goodbye because everything shut down without seeing the guys. So that's on a very personal level. I think it also just changed how I think about the role of music and how I want to be a musician in the world. It doesn't feel like it will ever be enough to just stand on stage and play Beethoven, and I don't want to ever do that again. And I think I would have gotten there in different ways, but this really sped that process up. Yeah, it was incredible.
I think this experience only served to embolden my passion for accessibility in music. It's something that I've always been really passionate about, and making sure that we can get music everywhere, and not just outreach to schools, which I think is just as important, but to go further than that. There's a lot of companies that are unwilling to step into spaces that they deem uncomfortable. And it's an unfortunate truth about a lot of the major institutions and organizations that we have in the States. And ever since that time in the prison, I've always fought for more accessibility in our programs and our outreach and the things we do. Because it's like you said, everyone deserves access to music and art, period. And I think about those guys all the time. And anytime, Jody, that you've brought them up in an email or a conversation, I just get flush with emotion and the happy memories and the joyous stories. But I think the thing I took away from it was that we need to be making sure that the arts are something that everyone has access to, regardless of their societal status or their monetary ability, anything. Everyone needs access to it. And I will continue to fight for that, probably for the rest of my life, thanks to, in no small part, my time at Grafton.
I would say that one of the blessings of the experience was at the same time that I was traveling back and forth to Grafton on Fridays, I would actually be leaving my musical studies thesis class early. And my thesis was on engaging in culturally responsive music therapy practices, and the need for that. And so it was a really beautiful opportunity to make my theorizing and into practice and application, and see what can work when you work with people from a place of authenticity, but also with the awareness of social, structural implications and dynamics involved. So I think that it really just reiterated the need for just being aware of the ways in which we've all been indoctrinated into racist, classist, patriarchal society, and the need to liberate our minds from the gross kind of program that's come from that. And part of that work is doing the work of being creative and tapping into our spirit through the arts. But also the work is actively meeting people where they are and how they are, and advocating for them when you can. So on that note, I did want to leave some links to some funding sources for both musicians and also for folks who are in prison right now, because I think that that's also part of the work. And I'm hoping that that can be posted on the Oberlin website or something like that. It was a very quick search, so it's not extensive by any means, but I do think that it's important to continue to do the work of just supporting folks however and whenever we can, especially our most vulnerable population. So that started, or that was definitely enhanced by this opportunity. Forever grateful to you, Jody. Thank you.
For me, I think this experience reaffirmed my identity as an educator, and the understanding that with every student, that art, that music is in them, right? And truly your job is to give them the tools to sort of access that in a way that they haven't before, right? And I think that's what the OMAG program did, brilliantly is sort of give some of these men the tools to really, work and invest in their own like education, their connection to the arts. But it is my firm belief that they had everything in them from the start, right? As soon as I walked in that room, and I was just there to really to just stand by them, right? To stand by their side, to sing with them, to let them know that somebody who is in college, right, trying to get an education themselves, can spend time with these men and create beautiful, meaningful art. And so that is what this experience really, taught me.
I just want to say that I think for so many singers, and myself included, the first experience we have singing is singing in a group of people. And I think at Oberlin, my first 2 years, I sang in the Oberlin College Choir, and I was much more often a part of a choir. But in my last few years, I wasn't really as much a part of a choir aside from my Fridays. And for that reason, I always greatly look forward to my times in the choir. And I think there's something that can't be replicated when you sing on your own or when you play on your own as singing with an ensemble. And I think even the act of breathing together is such a, it's cliche to say, but it's such a beautiful thing. And I think that's really important. I've also been thinking, I was also in the experience of being with these men and working on a lot of pieces together with these men in the choir when COVID hit. And I think it was heartbreaking to not be able to say goodbye and not be able to see where these pieces went, and also to recognize, all of our lives, everyone's lives around the world have been affected by the virus, but probably no one has been affected so much as the men in that prison have been. And I obviously can't understand what that experience may have been like post-COVID, but I can imagine it's very different lifestyle that those men have to lead right now. And so it reminded me of the importance of, when we wear masks and when we do these things, it's so that we can get back to having these kind of programs, and so that those men can go back to having those experiences. And the one other thing I just want to say is I've been thinking a lot about going forward and in our own lives as conservatory musicians, and especially in my own life, I want to continue to reflect, especially in this sort of quiet time because of COVID, about how, when I'm going to practice rooms and when I'm going to conservatories, how is my presence even doing that, denying access to those kind of things to other people? And so that's something I don't have the answers to, but I'm grateful to this experience for making me think about in ways that I didn't before. So thank you, Dr. Kerchner.
Like others have said, the opportunity to be with the men in the prison every week was one of the highlights of my week, if not the most fun thing I did, just one of the best parts of my week. And so I've absolutely missed being there with them. And it's hard not knowing when we'll be able to go back. And, the semester was cut short so abruptly, like Ailish said. 1 week it was, all right, nice work today, see you next week. And then there was no next week. And unlike most anyone else in the world, you can pick up the phone and call or text or message on WhatsApp or whatever. That was it. You can't just let them know that, we're going to switch to Zoom lessons or whatever, like I could with my private students. So it's been really difficult. And then to not know when we'll resume again. We compiled these packets of materials for the men to keep working on in our absence, and I wrote notes to them, and I wanted to say, like, see you soon or see you in the fall, but like, we don't know. So I just left something more vague, like, I look forward to the next time that we can do this. But it's really heartbreaking, like Evan was saying, the lives of people incarcerated have been so profoundly impacted, and the increased isolation from this time of pandemic in a prison is simply unimaginable. So I've come to realize how, not that I didn't realize it already, but this time just affirms for me again how much I value the opportunity to be in that space, working with the men, learning from them, and trying to imagine how even now in the midst of a pandemic, we can continue to support and encourage them and find ways to be in touch, and then figure out what it looks like to keep doing the work and improve the ways that we do it, improve the ways that people have access to it in the prisons. And yeah, it's just become a very unexpected passion of mine. I don't think that maybe 3 years ago I would have believed you if you told me I was doing work in a prison, but you know, high school Rebecca probably wouldn't have. So
yeah, it's been an opportunity. I think for me, I'm a better music teacher because of my work at the prison, because there is no such thing as just giving a downbeat. You can give a downbeat, but there may be nothing that happens. There's the level of detail and explanation, because it's all so new, has kept me an honest person, I suppose, as a music educator. But it's also made me reflect on my own privileges, my own privilege as a white person, as a white female. It's made me reflect on why they're in prison, what circumstances have surrounded their imprisonment, their incarceration. The whole metaphor of imprisonment. What ways are we all imprisoned, and in what ways do we deal with that imprisonment, and how can the arts help us to deal with that imprisonment and finding our humanity through that imprisonment? So metaphorically or literally, it's prompted me to consider questions that are long overdue in questioning, and I'm just thrilled that I've been able to sort out some of these questions with the guys, and listening to them and letting them be my teacher, to work with then students of mine, now colleagues of mine and friends of mine, to work with you and learn from you, and seeing how beautifully you interacted and opened up your hearts to these people, and conversely, how they opened up their hearts to us. So it has totally flipped my thinking in terms of what incarceration is, what it could be, what it shouldn't be, what it might be if it never existed, what happens in the meantime, because it does exist. Are we complicit? How can we not be complicit? Is the work really, do we have concrete reasons to think that we're making a difference? How do we know? We as artists always think music makes a difference, art makes a difference, but how do we know? How do we know? And so this, from an academic standpoint, has prompted me to question and to explore and try to figure out ways of exploring some of those deeper questions. And I'm ever grateful for the opportunity, and for all of you to have gone on this journey with me and with Phyllis in the ODAG program, and with the men. So thank you very much for all your insights, your wisdom over the years, and thank you for joining this wonderful conversation today. So thank you very much for being you.
Yeah.